quick little recording on our shadows and blurs. So I'm going to use a different image here just to do something different. And Brayson asked about portrait versus landscape, so let's go with the portrait image here. I switched over to tennis stock image just to kind of switch it up a little bit. So I've got to cut my subject out first. So I'm going to use select subject and do Command C, Command V to copy and paste. And here's my athlete cutout layer. Now, we did, in class, we did the tennis ball. You can actually see that this tennis ball already has a little bit of a blur to it. So I'm going to take my ellipse selection tool. Now make sure that your selection's inside of the tennis ball. And we're going to do Command C, Command V, or copy paste. And we're going to call this one tennis ball. Right? And then we made a copy of tennis ball so that we had tennis ball blur, right? So it's the process of tennis ball blur. And then we're gonna put the tennis ball underneath, the tennis ball blur underneath the tennis ball layer, right? So now we have it stacked. The process with Photoshop is just about understanding layers, selecting pixels on that layer, and how to stack those pieces of paper that we call layers in a way that allows you to create an image that tells a story based on the pixels and the concept that you have. So we're just making layers and manipulating the pixels on those layers. And each week as we're exposed to new tools, we're just learning different techniques or different ways to adjust pixels, select pixels, modify pixels on any given layer to tell a story. So we have 2 tennis ball layers now, and we're going to go up to filter, blur, motion blur. And I'm just going to crank it up a little bit so that you can see the motion. I'm going to change the direction or angle because it's coming off the racket. So it should be coming kind of in this general direction. So we have now used a blur under filter in order to create movement or motion. Now, in class, we also did the hair. So let's go back to the athletic cutout. And I can see that this guy's hair is a little bit crazy. So I'm going to just kind of circle around the edge of this guy's hair. Right? And I'm going to do copy paste, Command C, Command V, right? So here's his hair. And I'm going to name it hair blur. Turn that on. And this time I'm going to do filter blur. And let's try shape blur. And so now you can see that I'm just softening his hair a little bit. So now when you zoom out, the top of his head has just an ever so slight soft blur to the top of his head. Now, we also did the background. So I'm going to do background. And I'm going to make a copy of it and call it background blur. And we actually did 2 different techniques, but I'm just going to do the one that I like. And that is under filter, blur, and it is surface blur, which just gives us the ability to make it appear like it's on frosted glass. So I'm going to crank it down a little bit, crank down the pixels a little bit, and you can see if I crank it all the way down. So I'm just going to soften it a little bit. Not so that it's so distracting, but just enough to make him come forward. So now you can see how sharp he is. See how sharp he is compared to the background? You notice in this area right here when I turn it on and turn it off. So take a look at these pillars right here. When I turn it on, turn it off. See how it just softens a little bit? It allows him to be just a little bit crisper in the image, which really helps out with controlling the eye. What is sharp in the image and what is not sharp in the image. So look how this image started. It started like that. Then we added a blurry tennis ball. We added blurry hair. We added our athletic cutout. And we added our soft background. It completely changes the look of this image to allow the focus to be on the sharp part of the image inside of this particular composition. Now, the last thing we did in class was we created a shadow. So let's remember, we used the athletic cutout layer, right? The athletic cutout layer. So let's use our magic wand tool and select the background. So there you go. You can see the background of him is selected. I actually have a space here that I have to select, so I'm going to hold down Shift, and a space here to select, and a space in between his fingers to select. Now I have all of the negative space of my athlete cutout selected. So I'm going to do select inverse, and now I have the athlete selected, not the background. And so let's add a new layer over here and call it shadow. And now let's do edit fill, and let's fill it in black. And so now if I do Command D and I switch to the move tool and I just use my arrow keys, you can see that he now has a silhouette behind him. Now let's do edit, transform, distort, and let's make the shadow go way back in the distance so you can see it here. I'm going to make it a little wider and a little more drastic. So I'm making a polygon in essence. All right, so there he is. Let's squish him in a little bit so it lines up with his feet a little bit better. And hit the move tool to apply it. Now, we can also blur this. It's just pixels. It's just pixels. So let's do shape blur. Let's soften it, and then let's also make it have some opacity so it fades back. Now watch what happens. Right? So now now that you see the court, I need to distort the shadow a little bit more. So you can see and so now we have a nice drastic shadow for our composition. And I can soften it so you barely see it, but it's there. And now I created my own light source in essence. Now, if the light source in the image is coming from here, I can make it the shadow go that way, right? Because it started as the silhouette of our athletic cutout filled in black. I can make that shadow go any direction. All right, gang, good job today.